Sandra, give me the thumbs up when you see we're getting most of the people in, and I'll
Okay,
get us started.
we're at 2 right now. We can probably go ahead and begin and more people will begin to pop in, but we got 11 on now, so
Okay,
half.
sounds good.
Okay.
Hey, well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our Michigan Business Innovation Association member meeting. My name is Cheryl LeClaire, and I'm the Vice President of Operations for MTech Smart Zone up in Houghton, Michigan. I currently serve as the secretary on the MBIA Board of Directors and the chair of the events committee. So it's great to see everybody, and hopefully we'll get a few more popping in as we get going. A couple of quick notes before we get started. We are going to be recording this, so we'll post it on our various social media sites after we get everything finalized and edited that needs to be. Secondly, there will be a time for Q&As following each of our speakers today. We'll be utilizing the chat functions, so Carmen will be facilitating those. And so type your questions in the comments, and as you have them and as they come up and you think of something, go ahead and do that, and we'll follow through with those. Just a quick little note here about the MBIA. The MBIA is here to provide a supportive environment for entrepreneurial leaders and support organizations. And one of the ways we do this is through our quarterly member meetings. Typically, we invite a member to host, giving them an opportunity to highlight their programs, their space, maybe give us a tour, talk about something they've got going on, whatever they'd like to do. We also bring in a featured speaker to present on a relevant topic or maybe challenges that many of us might be facing. So if anybody is interested in hosting or has a topic idea, please feel free to reach out to any of us, myself or any of the other MBIA board members. We're always looking for ideas or people that want to show off their space, because a lot of times just hearing from other people and doing what we do, we can get ideas just from hearing about your programming. So please feel free to reach out to any of us. With that, our host for today's meeting is Lakeshore Advantage. Amanda Chaco is a director of entrepreneurship and manages their startup program, Surge. So thank you, Amanda, for hosting, and I'll turn it right over to you and we'll get started.
Muted.
Off to a great start. Thanks. Okay, let's try this again. Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm honored to be here. My name is Amanda Chaco. I'm the Director of Entrepreneurship at Lakeshore Advantage. And for those of you who are unfamiliar, Lakeshore Advantage is the economic development organization for Ottawa and Allegan County. And the majority of the work that we do is really geared towards those mid to large size employers with traditional economic development activities. But we also work with entrepreneurs, and that is where Surge comes in. And that's the program that I manage. I was really hoping to be at Surge today to give you a tour in person. Unfortunately, I threw my back out doing Zumba this weekend. Apparently, I can't shake it like I used to. So now I'm just going to have to tell you about it. And I do have some pictures to share. So just a few facts. Surge, again, is powered by Lakeshore Advantage. And Lakeshore Advantage has been around for at least 15, maybe 20 years. But we established our Holland Smart Zone in 2016. So Surge has been in existence for about 6 years now. And all of our programming takes place in the Holland Smart Zone. And we work with product and technology startups, concept through commercialization. And I typically meet with 60 plus entrepreneurs / startups per year. And we have programming and resources for each of the stages of development. And this picture is from our Surge celebration. That's the bigger Lakeshore Advantage team. and that was last June. So the Search Center is located in downtown Holland, which is the heart of the Smart Zone in Holland. Just opened in January of this year. Prior to that, we were doing the majority of our programming either virtually or in other spaces throughout the Smart Zone. We, for about a year or so, worked out of another co-working space in town and did a lot of things there, and then decided what would it look like for us to have our own space. So this is really a pilot for us at this point. We do have plans for a bigger innovation center footprint downtown Holland, but we still have a lot of due diligence to do before that happens. Right now we have about 30 plus members, and that is a combination of entrepreneurs, startups, and partners and mentors. So really trying to create an ecosystem within our incubator, as I'm sure many of you are, where the entrepreneurs have access to other entrepreneurial support organizations and service providers and people with domain expertise. And we've recently changed our model that now startups, to access the majority of our resources, need to be a member of Surge to do so. We still, of course, meet with entrepreneurs and connect them to other resources, and they can participate in many of our community programs and events, but really trying to build a startup community, create density of the startup ecosystem and visibility and accessibility to that, hoping to attract more entrepreneurs and people that love working with entrepreneurs. As I said earlier, we have programming in each of the stages of development. So if somebody comes to us, and I'm sure many of you have, customer development / proof of concept program. So we have a proof of concept program that sometimes we do an annual boot camp, but entrepreneurs could also access this on a revolving basis. And it's really walking them through that customer discovery, really focusing on the problem, that they're actually really solving the problem, understanding how big the problem is, and who that customer is before they actually go and build anything. Once a startup has landed on their target market and the problem and their value proposition, and they actually have something to sell, we're in the process of developing a first customer program. And this is really helping entrepreneurs acquire those first 10 to 100 customers, depending on their business model. So helping them get their messaging down, making sure, again, that they have the right solution or product to offer, exploring the different channels that they would go through to reach their customers, and helping them through that process and making introductions to potential customers for them. We have an entrepreneur in residence, Bryce Kaiser. He is a serial entrepreneur, and he meets with our entrepreneurs one-on-one. So when they come to Surge, he does an initial intake and assessment of where they're at, helps to plug them into the resources that would work best for them, and then sets 30, 60, 90-day goals to help keep them accountable, on track, provide resources and connections as needed. When entrepreneurs are ready, we have an investor readiness program, and this helps them to really understand when is the best time for them to raise capital, how prepared do they need to be to do that, understanding how to engage with investors, understanding term sheets and all of the technical things that go along with raising capital, as well as developing their executive summary, pitch deck, and getting coaching and connections in that area. So we have mentors that are either entrepreneurs that have successfully raised capital, or actual investors that mentor them and help coach them through that program. We have monthly founder roundtable groups, and this is more peer-to-peer, where entrepreneurs just support each other through critical issues and build that camaraderie and confidentiality, where they can talk openly about some of the challenges that they're having. As you all know, entrepreneurs always have to put a bright face on when they're talking to potential customers or family members or investors and can't let their guard down always. So this gives them the opportunity to do that. We have a mentor network of about 50 or so mentors with all areas of expertise that are available to meet with the entrepreneurs. And then we have select mentors that are our mentors in residence, where they actually work out of the space and are working more closely on a regular basis with our entrepreneurs. We have an entrepreneur support network, and this is our service provider network, where these service providers are startup friendly. They give discounts and some in-kind services to our startups. And in most circumstances, we can contribute 25% up to $2,500 towards projects, really trying to offset the costs of starting a company. And then we also manage the Business Accelerator Fund for our area. We like to make sure that we're building that community and giving the entrepreneurs ample time to connect. So we do happy hours once a month. Many times we bring in other groups to have their happy hours to give the entrepreneurs the opportunity to connect with people outside of the ecosystem, as well as demo their products. We have a Surge Coffee Talk once a month. Again, just a way to connect and help each other through those critical issues. Lunch and Learns once a month on all different topics. And then we do our Surge Days, which is an open house that we do quarterly, where we do open co-working and invite the broader community to come in and access the space. I didn't say during the initial introduction about the space, but we have multiple conference rooms throughout the space for the entrepreneurs and shared space. And we have a kegerator, which always goes over well with the entrepreneurs as well. An example of some of the startups that we work with. So LilyPad Labs is a startup. These are 3 co-founders that have a lot of experience in the automotive industry and design and product development. And LilyPad is a solar-powered semi-autonomous watercraft that people can access through an app, much like an Airbnb. So it's just making it really easy for people that don't want to own a boat and all the hassle and expense that go along with that, and just reserve LilyPad, and they can all bring their beverages and food and have a nice stay on the lake. So right now they're doing a beta test at Retro Boat Rental in Saugatuck, and that's where this boat is right now. And they also have a bigger one lined up in Marquette. 2 other startups of note is Revelin Sports. This is a young couple that out of college, they were pickleball players, and they have a patent pending material called BioFlex, and it's high performance, renewable. It's made of hemp and flax fibers. It's biodegradable, and it dampens vibration and dispenses shock. So it's, for those serious pickleball players, it is something that they I'm sorry, I want to make sure none of those chats were for me, telling me that you couldn't hear me. So it's a high performance pickleball paddle. They have a number of professional pickleball players that are endorsing their product. And they just opened a space up in Holland. For any of you that are familiar with Holland and where Captain Sunday is, it's a popular spot here. It's a small space right next door to that, and they have their manufacturing in the back and retail in the front. Knit is another startup. Liz Hilton, she does 3D knitting, and she has other clients, but her product is called Swaddlini, and she does 3D knitted swaddles for infants. And just about over COVID, she decided to go on TikTok, and overnight, with one post, increased her sales by 200%. So that just made her take off. And she even did a workshop for us on on TikTok, which was well attended because everybody was excited about emulating her success. And she also just opened up her own manufacturing space. She has been working in her garage with all of her 3D knitting equipment. So now she has a space in Holland. And another startup that we're working with is called Quint Workspaces. And these are a group of retired Herman Miller executives. And they've come up with a new line of furniture that's in between an IKEA and I would say Herman Miller. It's easy to put together for those that have home offices. They just raised 1.5 million in capital, but it wasn't only because of their product. It was also because they have developed an advanced manufacturing process that they do plan on selling to other manufacturers. And they just launched their manufacturing space in Holland as well. So that is what I have to share at this time, if anybody has any questions.
Doesn't look like there's anything in the chat. Looks like we got some thumbs up and applauses, Amanda. If anybody has any questions moving forward, please put them in the chat or feel free to raise a hand right now.
Yeah, and if you're ever in Holland and would like need a place to work from or want to take a tour, we invite you to come and visit.
Perfect. Thank you. Sandra, you're still on. Would you like to just introduce our next guest for us, please?
I'd be delighted. So
Great.
thank you, everyone. I'm Sandra Cochran. I'm president of Michigan Business Innovation Association and also director of the WMed Innovation Center down here in Kalamazoo. And it is my pleasure today to provide an introduction for my friend Karl. So I've had the pleasure of knowing Karl since my very early days of learning about business incubation. He has become a well-respected part of the incubation industry for many years, always willing to assist newcomers and seasoned pros alike. In May of 2021, just about a year ago, a little over a year, Karl became the director of the University of Florida Innovate Accelerate program. And in that position, he oversees 2 world-class business incubation facilities unified under one entrepreneurial support program, operating one of the top super hubs in the United States. He leads the management and operation of a 9-time award-winning entrepreneurial support organization comprising of the 97,000 square foot mixed-use hub facility, as well as the 32,500 square foot Sid Martin Biotech facility. In 2021, University of Florida Innovate Accelerate was designated one of the 20 INBIA soft landings programs. And prior to joining UF Innovate Accelerate, Karl was the first president and CEO of the Northeast Indiana Innovation Center in Fort Wayne, Indiana, where for over 20 years, he led the globally award-winning entrepreneurial support organization and launched tech-based economic and entrepreneurial programs to serve the underrepresented segments in Northeast Indiana. In 2020, the NIC won one of the 2 top industry awards, the INBIA Dinah Atkins Award and the Entrepreneur Center of the Year for mixed use. So over 2 decades of working with entrepreneurs, Karl has encountered some who are challenging to assist. And so today he joins us to share his experiences, offer some advice, and answer our questions about managing difficult clients. Please welcome Karl LaPan.
Thanks, Sandra. None of us have difficult clients, right? Let me see if I can get control of the screen here. And are you able to see my PowerPoint?
Yes.
All right, awesome. Thank you. I'm sure over 2 decades, I've never seen some challenging clients. But I think in this business, one of the things we all realize is that we are really in the scratch and dent business, right? So if our entrepreneurs were perfect or in mint condition, they wouldn't need us. And so we have to really meet our clients where we find them. But as I thought about the topic for today, I really kind of thought about three things. One is well-being, right? Becoming a bigger and bigger issue for entrepreneurs. Coachability and the emotional intelligence that entrepreneurs and founders and their teams need to have. And then boundaries and guardrails, right? Part of running an effective organic ecosystem is there have to be some natural guardrails and things that we pay attention to for the well-being of our community within our incubator. But as I was thinking and doing some research on the topic, this kind of stood out. One of the things we have to think about is, entrepreneurs have high highs and low lows. And as startup founders, they often experience things as a multiplier effect of what the average person in the population is. And so one of the things I always think about is what Karl once said, you never know what problems your people are bringing to work every day. So as we think about managing challenging clients, we have to think about, how we keep them intact. And so I really want to spend the time this afternoon, just sharing with you maybe some framework and thought process around how to structure these conversations. My hope is when we get to the Q&A, people can share some specific examples and we can kind of see how the framework might help them. And then along the way, I'll try and share a few too, but we do have kind of limited time. So I think as you think about coachable versus uncoachable, right? Part of what we need to do in our admission and selection process of clients is to really kind of select for coachability, to find people who bring that kind of humility, emotional intelligence, accountable mindset versus people who are often uncoachable, who are defensive, who blame others, have a victim mentality. And there was a great article in the Harvard Business Review some years ago and they call these not challenging clients, they call them impossible clients. And an impossible client, someone who exhibits one or more bad behaviors. So as you think about, segmenting your different clients into categories, this thought process of impossible or challenging really kind of resonates because, sometimes you have individuals that probably have many bad behaviors that they exhibit, at the same time. Many of you participated in a wonderful study that Matt Marvel and Dr. K did back in 2020. It looked at coachability and outcomes. And what was found is there was a high correlation between characteristics of the founder and the coachability as it relates to getting good results and impact from performance of the venture. So, the study found that younger people tend to be more coachable, women more coachable than men, larger team sizes more coachable, and that they tended to have this insight that the success and failure was due to their ability and effort and not to external reasons as to why they were successful. At the same time, when you had this coachability, there was great results in terms of translation to great outcomes, investment from angel investors, product innovativeness, greater goal achievement, and better overall venture performance. So the reason I'm linking this is as we think about challenging clients, my insight looking back over the last couple of decades is many of my most challenging clients also were some of my most high performing ventures, right? They were coachable, but separating sometimes the emotions of a situation or they're wanting to get their way, from the better things that we need to do to manage our ecosystem, got in the way. So this was an extensive survey that assessment that Matt and Don did, and you can kind of see some of the study design. But I just want you to be thinking about in the back of your mind that sometimes the clients that push you the most may be some of your best clients. And so sometimes that's hard to keep in mind, in the heat of the battle. So for simplicity's sake, I came up with 4 personas of the types of kind of common challenging entrepreneurs. And I'd ask you to take a client listing and then see whether or not any of these personas match to your insights about your particular client. So, the client isn't always right, but the client deserves to be heard, right? And that's such an essential customer experience pillar that most people forget in the delivery of their service. And I think in incubators, we got to keep that in mind. So I thought about this and said, okay, the majority of the challenging or impossible clients that I've had the privilege of working with over the last 2 decades, what did I see in behaviors and motivation about that type of entrepreneur? So, the wolf, beaten to the own drum, having to be right, that lone wolf, I'm going to make it or break it on my own. Squirrel, which none of us has experienced with entrepreneurs, right, is out there chasing everything, but can commit to nothing, but wants to be in control of all of that chaos at the same time. And then the bear, I want to get my own way. And then the ostrich, kind of tends to blame others for all of their problems. And that gets to that previous point that I talked about in that study, right? That's called external attribution, right? When we externally attribute our problems to something outside of our control and then blame that outside resource. So be thinking in the back of your minds about your client portfolio and see if you can't assemble, when you think somebody, if you put a C next to the name of the company and said, this is a challenging client, I want you to be thinking for the rest of my talk about which one of these dominant 4 personas you think that person or that company represents. I want to spend just a few minutes on kind of what I've learned over the last couple of decades around kind of what I call healthy coaching engagement, right? Because we have to meet the client where they are. There's a great book in healthcare called N=1, right? If you've met one entrepreneur, you've met one entrepreneur. You can't say that they all are the same. And so, as you think about engaging with a client, be thinking about kind of what are your core engagement principles, because in the heat of the battle, sometimes, we get lost in trying to be right, or to win, and not let the client beat us, that we might forget some of these things. Second is, where do the most problems happen? What hat are you wearing? Are you giving advice? Are you telling them what to do? Or are you finding the answers inside of the client? To me, this is one of the most important areas that people tend to make mistakes, right? We tend to I always ask the client, what hat do you want me to wear? Do you want me to identify alternatives and you select the best one? Do you want me to draw it out of you because all the answers and the expertise are within you? Or do you want me to give you a menu of options and you go off and decide what to do? And to me, a lot of problems in the coaching relationship, right? And managing challenging clients is about the coaching relationship. Many of the problems happen because people are unclear of what hat they're wearing. Exhibit genuine care. As I talked about in that earlier slide about some of the well-being issues for entrepreneurs, you can't intervene where a client isn't willing to go. And you never want to damage the relationship or the client in the process of managing through these kinds of relationships. Seeing around the corner, right? Looking at a range of possible or zone of agreement, finding ways to say yes when possible, right? That's another important thing. Not owning the client's outcomes. You cannot put the monkey on your back. At the end of the day, the entrepreneur is responsible for his or her decisions. All you can do is help support them along that path. You can't want for a client what they don't want for themselves, right? I want you to grow to be a publicly traded company. And the entrepreneur says, I quit a job I hated. I only started my own company because I wanted to be my own boss, right? I can't want something for them that they don't want for themselves. And then lastly, think about humble inquiry, right? There's really asking the right questions in that relationship and restating, what I hear you saying, right? Because sometimes what we think the client is telling us isn't what they're telling us. And if you haven't read Dr. Shine's book on humble inquiry, it's a really short paperback, and it's great about setting the right expectation with the client. Because managing difficult clients is about relationship building, right? Because the relationship, there has to be trust, right? There has to be trust with the client about how you're responding to what that client wants. And they have to feel heard and acknowledged in that process. So let's talk about just some of the ones that I've experienced, over the years, right? The client takes out their anger on your staff, right? So they're yelling and screaming at your staff. They want to get their way. They don't understand the rule. They don't think the rule should apply to them, right? That's a very typical one. Maybe by a raise of hand, do people feel like that's one that has gotten better or worse over time? I've seen an increase in the amount of angst towards our staff, just not because we don't have caring people, just that the client sometimes, isn't thinking from the perspective of our organization and the rules we have to follow because we're a university-based program. Recently, the going over your head to get what you want. I had a client that did not want to take a rate increase on their rent. And so they went behind my back to my boss and tried to get their agreement signed without the increase. Fortunately, my boss had sent them back to me. But I did call that client into my office and had a discussion around how that damaged their credibility with me, how it created trust issues relative to our ability to work together, and my expectation that you have every right to go above me, but you should at least copy me on the email so I know that you are. And so I think sometimes having those candid conversations with clients and then asking for the behavior change that you want them to have. And my behavior change was, you are perfectly within your bounds to go above me. But you should at least have respect for me to copy me on it, because anything you would say to somebody, that is my boss, you should be willing to say to me. Debate and know everything. We work with a lot of scientists who think they know how to use scientific equipment. They think they know how to dispose of hazardous waste. And they want to debate the protocols that we have here versus what we might have in an academic building. And so that can often cause frustration as well. See solutions only through their eyes and what works best for them, right? I want this. This is the outcome I want. And your ability to help them understand, we have 94 client companies. So, it has to be good for the vast majority of the community. Can't only be good for you, right? We can't have all these exceptions that are really good for you, but not really great. Tell you everything you're doing wrong in the incubator because they're deflecting away from their own problems. I'm amazed at the amount of people who think they're an incubator expert and their whole history is with one particular incubator, but where they were a client. And so, oftentimes that's a deflection. The client isn't wanting to deal with their own problems, so they just start to tell you what your problems are. And then lastly, skew the truth, right? A bit of that narcissistic behavior and self-importance. The client basically doesn't tell you everything you need to know, and they only tell you part of, the story, right? So that they'll give you a certain angle on the story, but not a complete story. And then when you try to put it together, you realize that they left out some critical pieces of what they might share. So these were just some of the common types of client challenges that I've seen. You can see I've even tried to code them to the type of persona to help just kind of guide you, because I do think that's really important. is to think about what type of behavior and motivation you're dealing with. And so you can better address and try to resolve that issue. So the coaching framework in general, kind of stepping back, de-escalate the situation. Oftentimes there's a lot of energy on both parties, right? Because you're trying to communicate information as to why this is important, and the client is trying to be heard, and in most cases try to get what they're looking for. It's really important to kind of listen intently and be empathetic, right? We need to feel all of the pressure that these entrepreneurs have in running their business and putting their assets and life at risk to do so. Restating and reframing is important because it is really a lack of understanding that often gets in the way of how our relationships develop with our clients. Being patient, you can't always get there on that first meeting. Asking questions and then trying to find some common ground. So thinking about that model, every situation's unique. Find what that persona type is, understand what their needs are, right? Their need may be to be right. Their need may be, that they have to get their way. We often have to set boundaries and expectations around how we're going to have those discussions, right? And then we have to be empathetic and caring. I want you to remember that car, that scratch and dent, because that is our entrepreneur. If they didn't have that scratch and dent, they wouldn't need to be in incubators and accelerators, right? We have to be able to get into that listening mode to really probe for specifics, right? Getting the client to articulate the pieces of what is important and understanding what it is that they want. But at the same time, we have to preserve that relationship, right? And it is based on trust. It is based on respect. It is based on unlocking value for the entrepreneur, right? You might say they're frustrated in their fundraising and they're not raising the money for their company as quickly or as fast as they think, right? Getting them some resources to help them, getting them some outside expertise, taking the time to share with them some reports around what's happening in our case, biotech, venture capital, right? Unlocking value every step of the way, even in these very impossible and challenging situations. We need to find ways to still try to create that value. And then finding common ground to the extent possible, really looking at brainstorming options, suggesting the solutions, offering feedback, right? And if we do a great job on our selection of clients, finding those coachable, self-aware, emotionally intelligent clients, that's going to be an important part of our ability to get to an answer that everyone can live with. And then finally, and then we'll go to questions and I'll look at the chat as well. I'm shamelessly plugging my book that I wrote in honor of my mentor and friend, and it contains a lot of the advice that I've given to entrepreneurs over the years that I've been running incubators. And so, that's a resource in addition to the ones I listed below. I'd also say I've come to realize behavioral change is tough, right? When we're expecting behavioral change from our clients, it's tough. And this is really kind of my recipe or model for it, is there has to be awareness of the need for change, right? So entrepreneurs may not always be self-aware. And so you've got to work to get that level of awareness. Secondly, you got to commit or be willing to change, right? And the big multiplier is there has to be a burning platform for change. And there are only two burning platforms for change. One is failure and the other is opportunity, right? If it's likely I'm going to fail and I know it, I can get behavioral change. If it's likely there's an incredible opportunity, I'm going to sell my company for $100 million, that's another part of behavioral change. So as you're working with entrepreneurs, don't, forget that, behavioral change is really tough. It takes a lot of focus and work to get it. And oftentimes part of this recipe is missing. and focusing on that with your entrepreneurs is going to help get you to a better result. So that's it for my slides. Let me look at the chat on questions, but I think one of the things I'd ask you to think about is, what situations have you run across, and what form of persona have you most encountered in your incubators, and what strategies have worked to help you diffuse and alter the situation to get a positive outcome?
That's a great question, Karl. And I'll start off by saying thanks for your presentation. Many more thanks to come. But you kind of kicked us off with our Q&A by posing a question back to the group. So we'll leave that question with the group for a second and give people a chance to respond and think about it. I guess I'll jump in and say, we've seen a lot of deflecting through our organization. I can't remember what persona that was, if it was the bear or the squirrel,
Yeah,
but
the back.
yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. I don't know if it's a result of, the pandemic. We got some comments in the chat regarding, an uptick or an increase, of some of those behaviors. I think our friend from United Way mentioned that. Molly, thanks for chiming in. But, definitely the pandemic has played a large role in some of the reaction that we've seen lately. And it could be, some of the things you mentioned, Karl.
Yeah.
These are the entrepreneurs' livelihoods. We know that we don't know what they're walking in the door with that day, what kind of financial burden or stress and other things they're bringing into it. So, kind of having that, sense of, kind of a supportive nature and, kind of meeting people where they're at is critical, first off, from where managers sit. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and you can only be responsible for your own behavior and not for anyone else's. But there are ways to create a climate of trust and respect that you can find common ground. I have found, even in the most unreasonable client interactions I've had over the last 2 decades, that I would say in the vast majority of those cases, we were still able to get to an outcome that was acceptable to both parties. In a few instances, no, but in most instances, yes.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's encouraging here. Looks like we've got another comment here from John. Would you like me just to read it, or let's see here. So excellent presentation, Karl. Thanks for taking your time to put this together. Well researched, very helpful. But goes on to say, would like to see your answer to a question through paying attention to the overall culture of that the entrepreneur creates. Mm-hmm. That's an interesting perspective. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I guess what I was saying, I kind of composed my sentence poorly there. I think it would read better. I would answer your question through paying attention to what the overall culture of the entrepreneur creates, meaning that there are going to be these swings in emotion, high and low. And when there's success, it goes high. When it's low, it can be low, and they can become more difficult, But overall, evaluating the type of culture that's being created within the company towards the employees and such. And I couldn't quite remember exactly what your question was, but I took it along the lines of, how to evaluate clients. Maybe you could restate the question and I could.
Yeah, I think triaging the client. You can, one of the things I've learned is it goes to that Tom O'Neill quote. If you've met one entrepreneur, you've met one entrepreneur. You really need to triage that relationship, that client, that situation, and not necessarily assume it all falls into the same problem-solving mode. And I think that's the insight for me, is I really need to make sure I understand what's going on. And there's both what actually happened, and then there's a lot of this other stuff, right? This emotion, this high, low, lows. I mean, all of that other stuff that is embedded in that situation. And I think sometimes it means we have to work a little harder to get into a conversation that can be healthy for both parties, right? Because the entrepreneur is banging on the desk, they are yelling and screaming, they want an outcome right this moment, right? And there's sometimes a lot of this other stuff that's happening that we got to focus on when we deal with those types of personalities, and triaging them into, and I just picked 4 personas of some of the most popular ones I've had to work with over the years, but to triage them differently, right? A wolf is different than a squirrel, right? What's the most valuable thing we can do in this relationship with a squirrel versus a wolf?
Mhm. Yeah, I would tend to agree there, and certainly have met individuals from every one of those. And having been an entrepreneur also for the better part of 20 years, and for us, for Dave and I, we should kind of categorize that a little bit. We were often asked to help out at different incubators and whatnot because of and so a little bit of our perspective comes from that EIR perspective, not necessarily from like your perspective, Karl, where you've run the incubator for 20 years, but trying to, we are in the process of helping a few different places right now too, and trying to get a better overall view of what the administration goes through too in running incubators. So thank you.
Yeah, and I think one of the other things that has become tremendously challenging that's different over the last 20 years is entrepreneurship thrives on mythology. And so the entrepreneur has been manufactured to think a certain way. Everybody will love my idea and want to give me a Brinks truck of money. Right. So that's, the mythology says there's so much money out there. I can have a bad idea and people will come and give me lots of money. So you're often talking an entrepreneur off a ledge, right? Because these ledges are created by the mythology of our industry. And so I think sometimes, we got to work a little harder to demystify, and unpack what the entrepreneur has been acculturated to believe. And I think that is a real challenge for us, especially today where, hey, if you did a business model canvas, you can raise as much money as if you written a business plan, right? So somebody says, okay, I spent 15 minutes on my business model, where's my money?
Right.
Right. And so I think all of these components of the mythology, where reality TV and Shark Tank and all these go and make a presentation and in 5 minutes we'll give you $100,000. We have to often talk the entrepreneur off the ledge because they've been led to believe and are seduced to believe something that maybe is an outlier, but not in the normative range of what typically might happen for a startup company.
Yeah, one of the ways that Dave and I have looked at this from the EIR perspective is many times an entrepreneur thinks that they're, let's say, because they've got this great idea, or like you said, they put this business, they believe they're on their journey, that they're at maybe, let's call it a +1 stage. What we walk in with a lot of times in evaluating them, taking that inventory of where they're at, and basically have to tell them they're actually at a -2, meaning that this thing is occupying a lot of your time. It's starting to occupy some of your resources, but how is it actually going to generate something positive in your life? It really currently is a negative in your life right now. It's not you're not at the +1 yet. You're really at a -2 in our way that we look at it and score it.
Yes.
I think it's not the same with what you're trying to say of talking about off the ledge.
Yes.
Yeah, kind of have to say, boy, you're kind of at a -2, aren't you? This thing's absorbing your resources, time and money.
Yes, for sure.
That's the reality. It was there before we got involved.
Great comments, John. Sheena from Can Do Kalamazoo said she sees a lot of squirrels. So that paralysis around not wanting to fail, I'm sure other people can resonate with that. But, as a culture, she says they talk about the importance of failing and the ability to pivot in order to grow. So that's a good kind of managerial culture to impart.
Yeah, and I would say there, the mythology is you can pivot forever with no consequence. And I think that is a problem, right? We often tell people pivot, and that's a honor badge, not a mark of shame. And then pivot again and pivot again. And you have people who have pivoted 5, 6, 7 times with investors' money. They may not well think, all learning is good, right? And so I think we got to be careful that pivoting comes with consequences around credibility and around competency of management. And the folklore is that you could pivot forever and people would be honoring you forever. And I think those are the kinds of messages that get really murky.
Good feedback there. Sheena's nodding, getting some stuff out of this. That's great. Bonnie adds she was agreeing that making a point of listening and respecting clients leads to better ongoing relationships, so that when there is an issue, they'll listen and better understand and come to common ground. So it's really part of that relationship building that you're underscoring, Bonnie. I think that resonates with folks too.
Yeah, and I think incubators do a really good job overall on that. We're on the side of the entrepreneur. When you think about it, angel investors really aren't on the side of the entrepreneur. Service providers may at times be on the side of the entrepreneur. The one entrepreneur advocate is the entrepreneur support organization. We win when the client wins. Right. So I do think we can have a special bond and relationship with our clients because we invest in their outcomes. It's theirs to achieve, but we invest in their outcomes. And I do think that puts us in a special relationship as a trusted advisor to our clients. Not to say that there isn't abuse of that, but in general, having been to over 500 incubators around the world, there is no doubt to me that we are some of the most passionate advocates of helping our entrepreneurs achieve the things that they're trying to achieve.
One thing I want to mention, and I'm sure most of you have run into this and learned this, but sometimes the best thing you can do is tell the entrepreneur no. Or we have had clients that are in no position in their personal life to be starting a business. They would put everything at risk, their family, their finances, their house. Now, that's not to discourage entrepreneurs. We want entrepreneurs. But we're very sensitive to the fact of these are people's lives, and you have to take that into consideration, especially when you're dealing with some of these personalities. And we have, heard from other people that, it's the entrepreneur, it's their life, it's their family. You really got to keep that in mind as you give these people guidance, because pushing them forward when they're not prepared or ready is not going to help anybody.
Let me preface something you're saying there, Dave. Maybe a built-in assumption there. So one of the things that Dave and I do before we give anybody any kind of advice, especially a firm advice like a no, is part of that evaluation is to understand if the entrepreneur is coming to the table as a needs-based entrepreneur, meaning they don't have a way to make their house payment and they have a wife and 2 kids at home. If they're coming in as a needs-based entrepreneur, and they're trying to become an entrepreneur to make a paycheck, and they come to us with maybe a piece of technology that they're dreaming up that they want to commercialize a product around, okay, that's the work of, like, say, maybe the classic opportunity-based entrepreneur would be like a Bill Gates, where all of a sudden he's not worried about making his house payment. He's not worried about that. If he wants to take 3 years to commercialize a product, it's not a big financial, it's not going to impact his life, and his ability to eat or his kids' ability to go to school. And so we kind of reserve, I wanted to preface what Dave was saying, that kind of no is reserved for that. All of a sudden, if we see a true needs-based entrepreneur trying to do some type of product or technology commercialization, some kind of opportunity, look, fulfill that, but you need to really have your family finances in order here.
Yeah, and there's excellent research on that motivational theory, if you look at the Global Entrepreneurship Monitor and the differences between necessity-based versus opportunity-based entrepreneurship, there's ample evidence of the focus on opportunity-based entrepreneurship. So maybe one question that would help me is, what surprised you most in what I shared? That maybe challenged what you were thinking coming into this about how to coach challenging clients. Was there anything that stood out for you relative to a surprise or something different than what you were thinking?
I don't want to hog the screen here, but I'll go first, but I hope other people chime in here. Frankly, Karl, while it maybe wasn't a complete surprise, I would use a little bit different word. You basically organized things that were maybe not quite as clear, right? Like the slide you have up right now about the wolf, the squirrel, the bear, and the ostrich. And that then, it's like one of my old college professors would say, it's better to have a bad model sometimes than no model. And I'm not saying your model is bad. I'm saying that all of a sudden it's presented in a way then that just makes it easier to understand and talk about. Sometimes this stuff is a little bit of a mid-push in even in my head. And so you brought a lot of clarity and organized what's kind of going on. And that's very helpful. Very, very helpful. So not so much a big surprise as much, boy, very nicely done. Very nicely put together.
I definitely echo that sentiment. Yeah, it was well presented. Are there any last questions for Karl or for Amanda?
I guess we know where to send all our difficult entrepreneurs to.
You're sending them all to Amanda?
Great.
Where are you based out of, Karl? I didn't totally pick that up.
I'm in Gainesville at the University of Florida.
Oh, okay. Okay, so you're okay.
Yeah. But I was in Fort Wayne, Indiana for the last 20 years. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Very, very good.
Yeah.
I know the LaPan name from business from the Michigan area here, but there's LaPans that were involved in the motorcycle power sports. So I was wondering in the back of my mind, but down in Florida.
Yeah. Well, wonderful. I would love to give a big thank you from the MBIA to both Karl LaPan and to Amanda Chaco from not only Florida, but right here in Michigan for being our presenters today. I know I learned new things today at this presentation. I hope you did as well. We have a lot of MBIA members that are part of the association here with us today, but we also have some new faces. And so I'd like to take a moment to welcome you to our MBIA quarterly meeting and echo what Cheryl said. We're really grateful for you to be here today. And I also want to just mention to you that we welcome you to join our association as members. If you're interested, you can go to our website, which is michiganincubation.org, and learn about our association and what we do quarterly and annually, as well as monthly, to support our members. We have membership options, and I am the MBIA membership and marketing coordinator, as well as the vice chair of the association. So formally, I'm Carmen Wells-Quigg, and I am with the University of Michigan as my day job, but vice chair of the MBIA here with the association. So please reach out to me if you have any questions regarding membership or just getting and staying involved. We welcome you to the ecosystem, as well as any future events that we have as part of our association. And with that, we're almost at the end of our quarterly member meeting. We have these once every 3 months. And so we have one coming up in the fall. In addition to that, we also are part of one of the founders and co-sponsors of the Great Lakes International Innovation Summit, and that's coming up in Indiana. So please look for information out of our association that's going to be for that event coming up in the fall, as well as the winter quarterly meeting as well. We just thank you for your time today. We appreciate you getting involved and the great questions that you asked. And please feel free to reach out to any of us with any questions you have. and have a great rest of your afternoon.
One
Thanks
quick
again.
shameless plug. One quick
Oh.
shameless plug. And that is, so Dave and I are here today on behalf of a new incubator that just formed in southeast Michigan, actually in the cornerstone of the state, the true cornerstone, Monroe County. The name of the incubator is Launch 734. And we basically helped to get that open here in May of 2022. So it is now,
Congratulations.
yeah, we're members, and you will see Launch 734 now on your, if you look into your own database, you'll actually see a new pin there on your map.
Well, congratulations. Welcome. We're happy to hear from you, and we look forward to engaging with you more in the future.
Okay. And thank you, Amanda, for your presentation too.
Thank you. Yes, everybody.
Wonderful. Have a great afternoon, everybody. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.